Hi guys, Thom Hunt here in the kit room. Today's subject is going to be all around how to select the right style of rod for your lure fishing situation, all right? There's four main categories we're going to talk about today, and each one of those changes the way you should think about it, changes the way you should approach whatever method or style or venue you might be on. And it does make a difference. If you've got the right tool for the right job, you're going to catch more fish. All right, so I totally understand not everyone can afford to have, 15 or 20 different rod setups, but I'll also give a few tips around which ones are the most versatile. So if you are only going to have sort of 1, 2 or 3 rods maybe, then you know which ones to get that are going to cover the widest sort of variety of methods and techniques and species out there for you. Those four main categories are rod length. We're going to cover everything from when would I use, say, a 5-foot rod at the shortest, up to maybe sort of most of my stuff's covered up to about 9 foot in the UK. When would I select a different length? The second one is going to be around the rating, which is normally registered in grams on the rod. So, for example, a really light one would be something like a 1 to 5 or a 2 to 7, which is quite light. And then we go all the way through up to like 200 or 250 grams for some of the heavy pike fishing stuff, throwing, big sort of 8 and 10-inch lures. That's the second one. Third one, we're going to talk about fixed spool versus multiplier reels. And again, there's a few different kind of discrepancies from BFS, which is the super lightweight stuff, through to your kind of fixed spool reels, covers a lot of most of your lure fishing in the middle. And then again, once you get up to super heavy at the top, you're tending to look at like fixed spool reels again, but we'll get into detail in a second. And then the last one is going to be around the action of the rod or the style of the rod, all right, which can cover some different materials. You've got your straight up carbons versus your carbon and e-glass mixes, and really the difference is going to be between what's called a moderate or a through action, which gives you a bend from the butt all the way through, or versus a fast action rod, which is much more stiffer in the butt and the middle section, and the tip tends to bend quite a lot. All right, so they have a lot more power, and there's different applications for both of those, and we'll cover those. So let's talk about rod length to start with. For me, the shortest rods that I use are about 6 foot. 6'1" is my kind of Westin street stick. That's what I use for my canal fishing. So I always learnt this when I was younger. It's a great adage to always remember: short rods for accuracy, long rods for distance. Now I'm going to say that again because I've got to ingrain this into your mind. Short rods for accuracy, long rods for distance. All right, so 6 foot rods, if I'm on those canals or small streams, some of the trout guys on the tiny, little wild brown trout, they might be going down to 4'10" or 5 foot, mid 5 foots, but for me, I don't really do a huge amount of that. So 6 foot is a really good all-rounder for your small stuff on canals. That covers perch, pike and zander. And again, once you get a balanced setup, there's some real quality fish in there. 3-pound perch, 10-pound plus pike, 5-pound plus zander. Even with short lightweight rods, you can handle those types of fish. All right, so it's all about balance, but we'll cover that a bit later as well. So 6 foot's about the shortest for me. 7 foot is when I'm getting into the middle. So I'll just rewind a sec. On your canals, there's not really much point in going past a 6'6" rod, in my opinion. Once you start getting up to your 7 foot rods, the longer you get in a rod, the less sensitivity you're going to have, the bigger the size reel you're going to need to balance it, and the less you can work the lures in very finesse mode. So if you imagine, if I only had a rod that was this long, I would be able to control a lure on the end. I wouldn't be able to cast it very far at all, but I'd be able to control the lure with 1/2 inch increments. If I've got a rod that's 10 foot long, I might be able to cast 50 times as long, but it's 10 foot long. That's quite long. I'm going to lose a lot of feel across the length of that rod. And it's virtually impossible to have that much control on a rod that's that long with a bigger reel on it to balance it up, trying to move it in 1/2 inch or inch increments. All right, so you're going to lose the longer they go, the better you get in casting distance, but the more you lose in sensitivity. So for me, canals 6 foot to 6'6" is ideal. Once you're up to 7 foot, I would say this is the best all-round rod length you can get. So in the UK here, if you ask me to get one rod, I would probably say a 7 foot, 7 to 21 gram rod would be the best all-rounder. You can just about, it's a bit on the heavy side to be doing your light canal stuff. It's absolutely perfect for most rivers, from small rivers to large rivers, and it goes all the way through to a bit of reservoir stuff. It can definitely cope with perch, might be a little bit on the heavy side for perch. For zander, it's probably about right. And then for pike, it's going to be on the light side. But if that's the only rod you're going to get, that's a great all-rounder. It's just right in the middle, and it'll do you for a lot of situations. So that 7 foot length is absolutely ideal. Like I said, losing a bit of sensitivity, but I'm gaining a bit of distance on my cast. And so, yeah, reservoirs, lakes, rivers, where I might be hitting chub or pike that might be getting slightly bigger, might be using a bigger variety of lures, slightly bigger chatterbaits, crankbaits, that type of stuff. 7 foot is a cracking all-round length. And then moving up towards kind of 8 foot, when I'm on the reservoirs, I'm looking for a pike rod just purely for distance and the large size of lures that I'm using. I'm looking for 8 foot to probably 8'6". We do in the Westin range, we do some amazing pike rods at 7'9", and there's a little bit of a trend coming out at slightly shorter rods because the quality of the carbon is getting really, really good. So you can have a slightly shorter rod that can still get some good distance on it. But as a rule of thumb, I would say most of your pike fishing stuff, if you're going to be casting big lures, any sort of distance, you want to be looking at 8 to 8'6". Now, once you're up to that level, you're really balancing your reel with a minimum of 2,500, probably somewhere more like 4,000 size reel. So that's why it kind of dedicates as a pike setup for me. You're not going to be using much on your wrist at all. They're too long, a little bit too heavy. Yeah, it's going to absolutely ruin your wrist and your elbow and your shoulder if you're trying to twitch a bait the whole time on an 8 foot or 8'6" rod. It's much more of a distance cast, get it out there, using it on the reel when I'm fishing for pike or fishing really aggressively, putting pauses in, and I might sweep the rod slightly, but I'm certainly not flicking it like I would, say, a 6 foot rod if I was on the canal, sort of finesse fishing. All right, so I hope that gives you a bit of a ballpark to understand. Second thing is ratings. So again, if you're the super lightweight ratings you're going to get are going to be like 0.5 gram to 5 grams. They're probably some of the lightest that we get in the UK. Amazing for like small trout, small perch. You know, you get amazing feel on those style of rods, but they are slightly limited for, you know, smallish fish and very, very delicate fishing. Once you're up to kind of 2 to 7, 2 to 10, and maybe sort of 3 to 14 grams. They're a little bit more you're getting a bigger range and you're getting much more variety that you can use. I'd still sort of class those as light or medium light, and they're good for perch. 14 grams, smallish pike on rivers and canals and stuff like that, but I certainly wouldn't be targeting pike on those sorts of weights. Once you're in that 7 to 21 gram, that's a really good all-rounder, and especially if you're on slightly bigger venues where your jig heads might be 10 or 15 grams plus a 4-inch lure, that's certainly going to get you up to 20 odd grams. And again, for perch fishing, distance wise, you know, I'd probably go up to about maybe like a 15 to 40 gram rod as kind of my strongest one for perch and zander. And then above that, I'm looking at like lightweight pike fishing for me is kind of in that 30 to 80 gram range. 100 grams is about kind of regular, and then once I'm up to what I call my Scandinavian pike rods, where we're using absolutely enormous lures, they throw up to, you know, like 200, 250 grams. So that's kind of the range from 0.5 gram up to 250 grams, but a lot of it is compressed in that first sort of 50 grams, really. From 0 to 50, there's a lot of difference. Once you get above 50, there's less categories, you know, it's just getting heavier, and yeah, that, you know, you'll have like a 100 gram rod, 160, 220. There's only a few categories after that, but in the first 50 grams, there's loads and loads of different options. Third one, multipliers versus fixed spools. So I am an out and out fixed spool man, but there are a couple of scenarios that I would use a multiplier. The first one is going to be around vertical fishing. So this is my reservoir vertical rod, very short, 6'2". Why is it really short? Well, I'm not casting, I'm dropping vertically off the edge. So like I said, I need more accuracy. I don't need distance, but it's a nice powerful rod, goes up to sort of 50 grams. And I use that on a multiplier, because when I press the button, I've got a really smooth release of that lure going down through the water, and I can control it perfectly. Couple of turns if I get it down to the bottom, couple of turns to bring it back up, and then if I want to drop it 6 inches, I can press the button and it free spools really, really smoothly. The problem you're going to have with an open or a spinning style reel is that to get that, it's just not a smooth process at all. You've got to take the bail arm off. It's sort of donk, donk, donk. It's a bit juddery on the way down, even if you're trying to feather it. And yeah, it's just a multiplier works much, much better for sort of vertical fishing situations where you're on a boat fishing vertically direct off the rod tip. The other situation, which has become super popular at the moment, and you can probably see here, I haven't even got any line on it yet. I'm just going to give this a crack in the next few weeks, is what's called Bfs Style Fishing. Now that stands for Baitcaster Finesse System. All right, these are designed to throw down to about 2 grams or so. So yes, on a 500 size reel or a 1000 size reel in a fixed spool, you actually can throw, you can throw half a gram, 0.4 of a gram. It's actually easier to throw because the line comes off the spool so much easier. With the line coming off this, it physically, I have to have enough weight that spins the spool to get the line off. So the minimum you can get down to on Bfs Style is about 2 grams, but it is very, very, like, it's taken the world by craze, or it's certainly taken the UK scene by craze at the moment. And I think the feel of it, and haven't done it yet, so I'm just please pop it in the comments if you're an absolute BFS advocate. But apparently the feel is completely different to a fixed spool, and it's much more enjoyable, and for those finesse situations between sort of 2 and 7 grams is an absolute dream, so I will give it a go. Then at the top end, when I'm doing my heavy Scandinavian pike fishing, yeah, you want to go up to a fixed spool reel just because they're so powerful. You're using big lures, you know, the cranking system within them is just, the materials that can be made, they're not indestructible, but they're virtually indestructible. Whereas a spinning reel, because it's trying to spin on 2 different axes, there's a lot more gearing in it. Whereas when you're winding, it's on one axis, one plane of axis, so it's a lot more kind of, in engineering terms, I suppose it's a lot stronger. It hasn't got as much gearing system in it. So yeah, I would go up to, and again, from a Scandinavian pike fishing, when I'm looking at 65 or 80 pound braid, huge lures, and 200 or 250 gram rods, that's when I'm bait casting. But other than that, the rest of it for me is all fixed spooled. So at the smallest, for my canal stuff, like I said, 6 foot, probably looking at about a 500 or 1000 size reel. 1000 is the one for me, but they're getting smaller and smaller these days, and lighter, which is quite cool. Then you've kind of got your 2000 or 2500 sizes, brilliant all-rounders. So again, for you guys that are only looking for one setup, I would go 7 foot, 7 to 21 grams, and I would fit a 2500 size reel on it. That will be a perfect all-rounder. And then once we're up above, your braids of kind of 15 to 20 pound maybe, and you're up towards your pike fishing territory, you want to be moving up to sort of 4000 size reels on your fixed spools, if that's what you want to get away with. So for the UK, most pike fishing situations could probably be done with a 4000 size reel, and a rod that throws up to about 100 grams. That could certainly throw 5, 6, maybe up to even 8 inch, but 5 and 6 inch that we use most of the time. If you wanted to do a fixed spool reel, absolutely, but definitely look for a 4000 size reel. All right, so that kind of covers a little bit about the reels. So we've done length, we've done rating, reels, and action of the rod. All right, so this is the difference between through action and fast action. So a through action bends really smoothly and evenly all the way down to the butt, and a fast action, the butt and the middle section are much more powerful, and it's got a little soft sensitive top. All right, so that's a fast action. What a fast action does is it's amazing for perch fishing and zander fishing for a couple of different reasons. One, the sensitivity of those rods is very, very high. The bit through the backbone of the rod near the butt and the middle section is generally a lot higher carbon content, which transmits bites really, really well. So they're very sensitive. Fast action rods are very, very sensitive, and through action rods are a little bit duller. And there's actually benefits in that. I'll explain in a sec. So higher sensitivity. So if you're on finesse methods like Ned rigs and drop shot and small shads, that type of stuff, absolutely perfect. You want to look for a fast action rod. And generally when so the second reason that you would use them on perch and zander, if you think about those light sensitive rods, you are going to be flicking around a little bit more for perch and zander, and when you flick and you pause, that's going to you're always going to end up with small bits of slack in the line because you're not winding constantly. All right, so whenever you're putting pauses in, whenever you're stopping, whenever you're flicking, there's always going to be a little bit of slack in there. So if a perch, for example, comes up and hits a lure and there's already a bit of slack in it, you want to be able to be as quick as possible at connecting with that fish. So on a through action rod, the tip would load. There's not enough power to set the hook yet. You'd get to the middle section of the rod, still not enough power. You might have to bend it virtually all the way to the butt before you get enough power, and quite often it just doesn't set the hook properly. So you want a fast action rod on your perch and your zander so that you can feel those bites quickly and you can react to them and set the hook quickly. All right. The flip side of that is a through action rod, which I typically use for two situations. One is pike fishing and the other one is going to be crankbait fishing, and they're slightly separate. The first one on pike is you're tending to fish for pike a lot quicker and a lot more mid-water. I don't tend to flick around for pike as much. I'm tending to fish bigger baits, and like I said, slightly longer rod maybe, and I'm it's going to ruin my wrist if I'm trying to flick the whole time. So I do a lot more on the reel. And when you get a bite, when the lure is moving, if it's moving quite quickly, if that pike comes up and it hits a moving bait, a softer rod actually doesn't set the hook immediately. You actually want a through action rod to give a quarter of a second delay, which actually allows the bait to get properly into the mouth. If a pike comes up and touches it and you feel that on a fast action rod straight away, the likelihood of you counter striking and ripping that bait out of its mouth, you've got to remember a pike has got a long snout, all right? So he can touch it here and he can touch it here on the front of his lips, and you can quite easily pull that bait straight out of his mouth. So you want a slower, more through action rod. You almost want the bite to load up and it gives you just a quarter of a second and then strike into it, and it's allowed that bait to get into his mouth properly. Absolutely key. The second thing on crankbait fishing is a similar kind of scenario. On crankbaits, yes, I do catch on the paws a lot, but I fish them in warm water and I tend to fish them when I'm on a straight wind. So when you're perch fishing, again, you want the rod to bend round a little bit to get into their mouth properly. If you felt the bite, as soon as he touched it, the chances are you're going to strike, and they tend to be big baits and they don't get them in their mouth properly. All right, so you want that slower action rod. Also with crankbaits, especially if I'm digging them into the bottom, a softer rod just helps. You'll be winding like this, and a softer rod, you'll see it's bouncing, and you can feel what's going on the bottom. That crankbait is digging around and it's hitting rocks and all that sort of stuff, and you want that tip to be wanging about. And then when you get a bite, it goes whoop and just goes round. If you've got a really fast action stiff rod with that crankbait going in, it just doesn't feel right and it doesn't dig in properly. it'll hit a rock and then it'll turn over, and it's just all wrong. So definitely make sure you use through action rods for crankbaits and through action rods for pike. There we go, guys. Hope that wasn't too long. I didn't get too in depth for you beginners out there, but there is an awful lot to think about. Yeah, I mean, I haven't covered things like jerkbait rods, which are super heavy but super short, you know, 6'6", but cast up to 200 gram rods. Very specialist, so we won't talk about that too much today. Haven't covered a couple of other styles as well, but I hope I've given you a good all-round understanding of kind of how to go about selecting the right rod with the right reels for the right venues and the right species. Good rules of thumb. So yeah, if you liked it, hit the like. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. It really, really helps the channel. Share it around on all the other social media platforms. And definitely, the reason that I started these conversations or these videos is to have conversations with you guys. So pop some comments down below in that comment section. I get back to everyone. I really enjoy hearing stories, listening to people, asking questions, and I make videos on as many questions as you guys can ask. So yeah, if you like my content, hit the like, hit the subscribe, and until then, I'll see you on the next one.